Howdy my underlings, welcome to another controller video. This one is about the GameSir X5 Lite, a mobile telescopic grip controller. As usual, this isn't much of an unboxing as it's not often that these things just truly, work right out of the box. So I did have to do a little bit of setup beforehand, but this is essentially as close as to functioning out of the box as you're going to get. It had an app you can download and it'll handle mapping for your gaming apps for the most part. But out of the box, I was able to plug it into my phone and play some retro games after a quick remapping. The app also provides some added functionality, but I'll get into that in its own section. Story time first. I bought this for myself because after my Retroid Pocket 3 Plus video, I was a little disappointed by its performance, small buttons, and lack of ergonomics. I feel like that once you get to a certain size, you should just give up on portability and focus on making the most comfortable device possible. The RP3 Plus was essentially just a slab with rounded edges. So after that video, I decided I needed to find an alternate solution for Android-based emulation, because Android currently can do a lot more in the retro gaming space than just Linux can. But Linux does have its benefits over it. I go over that in my video on finding the best retro handheld device for you. That'll be on the end card if you want to check it out. But I took a look at my phone specs. It's a Note 10, so it's about 6 to 7 years old. Despite that, it was not only better specs in every way compared to the RP3 Plus, but it was better than the 4 and about on par with the 5. I never needed to get the RP3 Plus, it turns out. So I thought, let's try my phone. So I went online and looked up mobile controllers in the affordability price range of about $30. Something just cheap enough to let me try it out and last me until I figure out for sure whether Android emulation is something I want to do long term. I found several controllers in this price point, but the two that interested me the most was today's GameSir X5 Lite and the Turtle Beach Atom. The Atom looked uncomfortable with sharp corners, and I swore off Turtle Beach way back in the 360 days because their headsets were made of paper mache. Turtle Beach to me just has always been the bad sort of budget device, and GameSir surprised me with the $20 Tegenaria Lite, but the Atom did have this neat gimmick that I was willing to gamble on. The controllers are Bluetooth, and interestingly, they're kind of like Joy-Con and separated from each other, and they can turn over and then slot into each other for maximum portability. But in the end, the winner was obviously GameSir, as they had one-day shipping, and Turtle Beach's best was 2 weeks, and I wasn't going to wait that long for a controller. I also knew that for me, the GameSir controller was going to be the better controller based on my experience with the Tegenaria. So let's talk about the X5 Lite. I'm going over my very early experience, talking about its features, the app, and I'll even show some gameplay and me playing with it on various retro and modern games. Remember that these tests are going to be based on the controls alone, the controller itself. That's it. If the gameplay has issues, it's because of my phone and me not knowing what its limits are yet, so we can't really blame that on the controller. All we can blame on the controller is the feel and how the buttons perform, which is what I'll be talking about. At the end, I'll tell you what kind of gamer I think this controller is best for. Alright, so here we are with the box. This little kitty is here to help me keep everything centered. They're face palming me because I keep having to restart the recording because I keep moving my hands outside the frame of the camera. So they're here to remind me that this is the center of it. I guess I could have used the dog on the map, but the kitty's cute.
Oh well, thank you for watching. Please subscribe.
Oh wow, you didn't have to say that, Mr. Kitty, but I appreciate it. This is the GameSir X5 Lite Type-C wired mobile gaming controller. This is the controller. It is a telescopic controller, so that means that it pulls out. And let's talk about the features on it. GameSir, the anti-stick drift experts, and as usual, GameSir's branding is covered in mentioning the Hall effect sticks, which kind of worries me a little bit because it is possible to have bad Hall effect sticks, and I worry that when someone or a company uses the buzzword a little too much, it makes me worry about whether it's actually good or not. So, I guess I'll find out in a year or so. I'm gonna have to play with these controllers a lot to get them to really tested. Like, people wanted me to talk about the Tegenaria a month later and seeing what I think of it now, but honestly, you're not going to see stick drift in a controller for months. At the earliest, it's going to take 3 months to show a bad stick drift issue, and at the longest, it could take up to a year. I remember my Xbox 360 and Xbox One controllers didn't have stick drift until like a year in. But at this point, y'all are probably just happy with something that doesn't get stick drift just after 3 months because of, how the Switch controllers are. So yeah, drift-proof Hall effect sticks, software glyph swap. This is software that is in the controller itself as well as in the application. It's got USB-C direct connection, and it is 105mm to 213mm. It will fit the majority of phones, but I think you will find that it will struggle with tablets. Again, Hall effect sticks on the back, plug-and-play movable Type-C connector, responsive membrane buttons, compatible with phones 105mm to 213mm, laser engraved textured grips, and supports pass-through charging. Then we got some barcodes and stuff on the side, QR codes to take you to the controller, and that is it. The controller itself is smaller than I thought it would be. So here's a really grungy Xbox controller that my brother left behind when he moved, and it is based off of the Xbox One controller, so that is about the right size. It's by Power A though, so it's pretty close to the actual Xbox controller size. And then here is the one from GameSir. So width-wise, they're about the same. Weight-wise, this is much lighter. This is also shorter, but got about the same amount of booty on the back. And that's what I'm here for, is I'm here for that ergonomics, the booty. I love that personality. Sorry, Mr. Kitty.
Don't like and subscribe. They're abusive. You saw what they did to me.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kitty. It was an accident. All right, so reminds me of my ex. And then this little thing right here, the male type USB-C connector. It is essentially the controller's PP, which also reminds me of a different ex. And then we also have a cock button. God, I'm just seeing my exes everywhere today. Anyway, let's talk about it. Out of the box, it's way smaller than I thought it would be, but its grip size and form factor is pretty similar to the RG Cube XX, which is something I love and I'm very comfortable with. It's actually a little more ergonomic than it because it's a little wider, but they're essentially very similar in shape. So I'm already pretty comfortable with the RG Cube XX, so I'm already liking this. I would like it if the palm rests extended a little further down so that they would be more comfortable, but this is already a massive improvement to the form factor of a Retroid device, in my opinion. We have the D-pad on the bottom. Since this is for modern games, the analog sticks are very small, which I very much don't like. These are incredibly small. These are smaller than the ones on the RG Cube. They're a little longer though, and they are much smaller than the Tegeneria's analog sticks, and they're even much smaller than the Switch 2's analog sticks. But it is the same length, if not longer, than the majority of devices I have. So the sticks are longer than Retroid, the stick is longer than the RG Cube XX, the stick is the same length as the Tegenaria, it just looks smaller because of the smaller head. So this incredibly tiny head is the source of my issues with the analog stick. It's one of the big things I don't like about this. But I'm playing retro games, so I'm not really using this all that much, I guess, outside of PSP, which had, you know, about the same size thumbstick head. The sticks are Hall effect, like they said, but that can be a buzzword, so that can be a little worrying on its own too. But it's a little weird that the analog sticks are bigger on these other devices like the Retroid Pocket 3 and the RG Cube XX, because those are two that you're not really expected to use the analog stick on all that much, so it's weird that this is you're expected to use the analog stick and it's smaller, so that's uncomfortable. The D-pad is a single unit Nintendo Plus style shape D-pad, the classic Nintendo ones, like something you'd see on a Game Boy Advance SP. Let me grab my Game Boy Advance SP for an example. I don't have a Game Boy Advance SP, but I do have a PSP on me so we can compare the stick sizes. I don't use this one that much because it doesn't have the good backlight, but you can see the D-pads are similar, even though the D-pad is much bigger. Still very thin. This D-pad is, you know, pretty much the same. It is not as shallow as the GBA SP's D-pad, but it's still pretty shallow and it's pretty responsive. I was finding myself performing much better in reaction-based things that use the D-pad. This D-pad is actually really good, and by extension so are these face buttons, which are equally shallow. I do think I prefer the RG Cube's disc D-pad. I think this may have converted me fully to a disc D-pad user because I just like how it feels, and it's better to roll and use it as if it was an analog stick. See, it's easy to sit your thumb in the center and rotate it like that. So I think I prefer the disc D-pads now. I think I've been converted. I still don't like the Genesis one. It's sharp feeling. The backseat buttons, by the way, this is Xbox styled, so A, B, X, Y, A at the bottom. So like a PlayStation controller, but lettered. And they are equally soft and equally quiet. My microphone actually doesn't even pick it up. That's how quiet it is. But if I took something like an Xbox controller, it could probably pick it up. That's my RG Cube. It makes a little bit of noise. Isn't that cool? Don't I have such cool toys? Sometimes I forget how much neat stuff I actually own and that I never use. Don't sell your consoles when you're done with them, kids. Just keep them forever because there's gonna come a day that you're gonna wish you had them. Anyway, the buttons are good sized. They're about the same size as the RG Cubes. Well, no, they're bigger. They're bigger than the RG Cubes. They're much bigger than the Retroid Pocket 3's backseat buttons, and they're a little bit bigger than the RG Cube's backseat buttons, which I already considered pretty comfortable and fine. But they are still smaller than the Tegeneria's buttons, which are pretty close to an Xbox controller's buttons. They are still smaller, but this is right at the perfect comfort level, much smaller than this, and you're going to get imprints on your thumbs when you press the buttons. The softness also helps, which is going to prevent, you know, thumb pad imprints on your thumb. The stick clicks are also quiet. Okay, well, they're not that quiet, but you're not clicking that much, but they're quieter than something like a different console. By the way, I do have a noise gate on my microphone and a noise filter, so if it's able to get through the noise filter, I would consider that loud, because I've got it set so that my fan doesn't get picked up. So basically all of the buttons are quiet. So this is quiet, this is quiet, this is quiet, but also so are the bumpers. The bumpers are pretty quiet. The LB and RB buttons are both very soft and shallow, which means they have low travel time, so buttons click pretty quick. But the triggers aren't full triggers. They look like they're full triggers, but they're not. They're actually a button underneath. It feels like a membrane button, possibly. I don't know for sure. But they are very shallow, which means they would work perfectly fine for shooters, but because they're not full triggers with partial presses, it's not going to work well for things like racing games where you want to do partial presses for acceleration. So not good for racing games, perfectly fine for shooters if you can get around these tiny sticks. No back paddles or additional shoulder buttons, which is fine, but I feel like the additional back buttons are kind of a bare minimum nowadays. There are games that, for me, I find to be unplayable without back buttons. For example, Mycopunk has you sliding and jumping like every second of gameplay, so not having the additional bumpers back here basically makes it so that Mycopunk is not playable, but I wouldn't use this to play Mycopunk anyway because of the bad tiny control sticks. It has a cock button, which I mentioned, which is used to wake the device, and a light around it signifies connection. The cock button doesn't do much, and there's an additional macro button here that can be used for things like turbo. I haven't had much of a need for either of these buttons, as many retro programs have a function to allow you to program a button to always turbo, or have a specific button be a turbo version of another button. Like you can make it so that this is the A button, and then this turbos the A button. As for how it works with the phone, we have a telescopic body that starts at 105 millimeters and extends to 213 millimeters. It'll fit the majority of phones and smaller tablets, but it will not fit iPads or anything around that size. So plugging it in, it uses a USB connection, no Bluetooth. There's no Bluetooth on this. So it is taking power directly from your phone. Well, I'm going to show you how I do this with just my two hands without bracing it. Slide it in, pull, put in. And then you can see my notifications. Let's just delete all of those. And you can see my background, which is an old character that I made that someone made fan art of. But yeah, so it's just like this. This wakes the device, like I said, and turn it back off. This button can also be held, and up and down on the D-pad can be used to increase or decrease the volume, which is useful because my volume buttons are all the way up here, which I would have to do quite a bit of reaching to get to. So it's nice to have that shortcut. Something you need to look out for is that if you plan to play this with a case on it, if it is too thick, it is possible that it will push itself out of the grip. So if you got like a wallet case that's got a lot of back to it, it's gonna pop itself out. You can swap these rubber grips out to fit a wider case, but remember, if it's thicker, it's gonna force your phone out of the case, out of the grip. So I would suggest getting a new case that you use specifically for this if you have a thick case, and get one of those thin ones. And I would also recommend that you use tempered glass on it, a tempered glass screen. It's a thicker screen. It doesn't interrupt your touch, but it's a thicker screen that is also made of glass that works as a protective layer, like a screen protector, and it is much better and safer for your phone. So yeah, because this uses USB-C, this presents a lot of problems. First of all, the speakers are blocked on the side here. The audio only escapes through these grooves here, so the maximum volume is pretty low, so you can't get that high with it. This has only really bothered me when I was playing Rock Band Unplugged on the PSP. And then I will not be able to show you gameplay of that because it is not royalty-free music. It is all very licensed music. The overall weight of the controller, even with my phone in it, still feels like it weighs less than an Xbox controller, so that's nice. The USB-C, though, I keep getting distracted from the USB-C. Because of the USB-C being required here, it blocks audio if you have a speaker at the bottom. And then your microphone, which for me, I think is at the top here. I actually don't know where it is on this device. Yeah, my microphone's at the top, I think. I also have a stylus that comes out the bottom of this, so that would make it good for DS gameplay. But the problem is that because of the stylus being at the bottom, I can't easily pull it out and put it back, so I end up just using the touchscreen with my thumb. I swear it's not that bad to get the controller in once you just find where the hole is. And then if you have a headphone jack on the bottom, which is usually where it's at, there's no phone with a headphone jack on the side, I don't think. That means that the headphone jack is also blocked. This is a device that has a USB-C charge-through, pass-through port, but it does not transfer data or audio. So if you have one of these little dongles that puts audio through it, a headphone jack and a USB-C on it, and you plug it into here, it will not work. It will not pass any audio through. I don't think it passes data through at all either. It is just for charging. So that's kind of annoying, but I guess it's good that it can charge because it does need to charge because it's consuming power from your phone constantly. So being able to charge while playing is awesome. But it is also a fast charge compatible charger. So I could plug in my Switch charger into this and it would power the phone and it would be fast charging compatible. But it does block some key things that you might want and it prevents you from using headphones with this. So you are forced to use wireless headphones, which I guess most people have right now. But audio quality is better on a good pair of headphones than it is on even the best wireless earbuds. Suck it, Raycon. Other than that, the grips are laser etched for a sandy texture, like on most controllers. That's pretty commonplace now. And aesthetically, I think it looks pretty neat. It has a little bit of color, just little splashes of it. And honestly, more technology needs color. These are electronics, and electronics nowadays are accessories as well. So we should be able to have them in whatever cool colors we want. This yellowy green with black accents against a white background looks pretty nice, but I'd appreciate more color choices. Personally, I like really dark pinks, but they did have a limited edition Zenless Zone Zero series, which was very cool, but aren't available on their shop anymore or Amazon. The black grips on the interior work pretty well. With the already attached silicone grips and no case, my phone holds pretty tightly. I've held this above my head and I have not smacked myself in the face once. I've even shaken this pretty aggressively over my bed to make sure it doesn't fall out. You're only going to damage your phone with this if you drop the entire device, or if you pull on the right side, or you shake while holding the right side, because you can make it come out if there's some weight. If no pulling is done, it will stay in here. If you don't trust this $30 controller with the life of your multi-$100 phone, I don't blame you. So you can put a case on your phone and swap out the grips with a different grip, but keep in mind that increasing the overall thickness of your phone might make it not fit, as the USB-C might not slot it correctly even if it changes angles. It can fit your phone with a wallet horizontally, but it's probably too thick to hold it and will pop out. And that was the case for me. So this is an old phone that I've been raw dogging in it. No protection. Plugging the controller is easy, but not something you could easily do while drunk, arthritic, or if you have greasy hands. Its micro peen needs to be held up, plug in the phone, and then the right side needs to be extended. After a while, I was able to do it with just two hands without needing to brace it against anything, and I think I can do that now. There we go, first try. Pretty easy to do once you get used to it, but you should probably just brace it against yourself anyway just to be safe. Some extra notes from the manual. It says that it can support the Switch, Android, and iOS, despite the box only saying Android. The only Apple user in my house is still using a Lightning cable, but I put it on my Switch 2 to risk it all for you, and it does work with my Switch 2. It did not brick my Switch 2 when I did it. It fits, I just gotta find the power button, and it did not brick my system when I did it, and it's compatible, but you have to do this. You hold the two buttons up here and it turns it into Switch mode, and then when I turn it on it should function. So because it only holds the Switch vertically, oh, my battery's dead. Because it only holds the Switch vertically in one of two ways, since the Switch 2 has only charge ports on the bottom and the top, it can only hold the Switch vertically. So if you have a Switch 1 that you've hacked to play DS games on, it'll work and you can do this and it'll be fine. It's also good for if you have arcade games that you're playing in Tate mode, which is 90-degree rotation. So it will work for shmups that support that, which is what I used it for. But I don't see most people using that, and I don't think you need to buy this controller for that specific use. I don't think you'll get enough utility out of it on a Switch 2 at least. As for macros, you only really have a handful of options. Turbo is done by holding down the macro button and then pressing the button of your choice. AB swap is holding macro and A for 2 seconds, which will swap A with B, X with Y. Adjust volume is the cock button and then up and down on the D-pad. This can be convenient if your phone has a hard to reach volume spot. Then the final macro is double tap M for screenshot, no record button, but that's fine because most of you have phones that can do screen recording. Overall, this is a pretty good controller grip. All of the issues that I have with it are side effects of the type of controller it is. It's a cheap $30 small portable controller. In spite of that, the only uncomfortable thing about it are the analog sticks. I like everything about the controller except for the sticks, the triggers, and the tiny grips. I also think it would benefit from vertical clips like the Atom, considering that this is telescopic though. I don't think it would have the space to. Well, maybe here, but on the right side it really wouldn't have room to because it's gotta worry about where it clicks in. I'd also prefer the D-pad at the top, but I haven't seen any telescopic grip controllers that have the D-pad at the top, so they really need to get on that. That needs to be a thing. With how popular the Terraria is, I think it'll happen now. Now for the software. The GameSir software is somewhat interesting. It immediately detected not just my controller, but the color of the controller when I plugged it in. I can't even identify the color of this thing without, getting some help from someone. First thing I did though was I updated the firmware, and after that the controller stopped working with just about everything. Then I went into the game section and I added the apps that it wasn't working with. Dolphin Emulator, PSP, PSSP, Steam Link, it identified immediately. Moonlight, it identified immediately as well. Show, it did not work with for some reason, but once I added Show to this and I set it to native mode, it was working perfectly fine. For some reason, it wasn't on native mode. But once I did that, it started working like normal again. So a weird thing about the controller is that it doesn't work correctly with the app without having Bluetooth enabled. If you don't have Bluetooth enabled, it'll let you know that it is not enabled and that the controller will not receive full functionality. So despite this controller not using Bluetooth, it still needs Bluetooth enabled. So not only is it sucking power out of your phone through the USB port in order to power it, but it is requiring you to keep your Bluetooth on at all times, which is also increasing the power load on it. So unfortunately, you have those two extra things taking out your power, but those things don't take up that much power anyway. It's just annoying. I was hoping to squeeze out even just a little couple extra percents if I could, but nope. Inside the app, we have a gamepad tester, which we will load this into the controller grip. First try this time. No, not first try. You feeling shy, little guy? Think about the Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition. Ooh, oh, that got you going. Okay, and then pop it in. Okay, so here we have the gamepad test, which lets us see that the buttons are working. All the buttons are working. Doesn't show a macro button test in there, but as you can see, there is a analog stick tester, and we can see that it doesn't really have any cardinal snapping as far as I can tell. You can get the full range. It goes exactly where I want it to. It's just a little hard to control because of the tiny tips on the analog sticks, but it works. They both work. All the buttons work as intended, and the sticks seem to work within full range within it with no cardinal snapping. I don't think you'll hit any accidental diagonals with the D-pad unless you're trying to. See, no pressing down, not until I push over. I'm pressing at the bottom. I had to go pretty far to actually hit him, so I don't think you're going to be hitting any accidental diagonals with this. But I'm not really a fighting game player, so I might not be the best person to test this part, the accidental diagonals and stuff like that, so I'm not really doing a whole lot of heavy D-pad use. Not with what I play on this. What I play on this is mostly stuff that uses the analog sticks. And let's go back. In here you can also change the layout from Xbox ABXY to BAYX. Switch layout versus Xbox layout. I recommend keeping it in Xbox layout because it's not like you can change the letters. You're just going to confuse yourself by doing that, so I never got the appeal of this, other than people who are used to the Switch mostly. And the final bit of features related to the controller itself is the games section here, which allows us to change the mapping mode for games. There are 3 mapping modes for the games. There is native mode, hardware mode, and software mode. Native mode is basically the apps themselves having game controller functionality built into them. As you can see, the Xbox app, Dolphin, Game Pass, PPSSPP, Steam Link, they're all native mode because all of those apps are designed to work with controllers on their own without the assistance of this thing. Call of Duty is very specific about which controllers it accepts. So it's set on hardware mapping. Hardware mapping basically takes the touch control input, like the D-pad that's on here and the right simulated analog stick here. Those are then changed into these, and they're marked on it on theirs. So things like the fire button would be an icon on the screen that you have to tap while playing. Instead, what it does is it simulates the right trigger being on the screen there, and when you press the right trigger, it makes it do the tap there. So it's turning these into taps, which is garbage. If the app doesn't support controllers, it doesn't support controllers, and that's the best that we can do. This is really the fault of GameSir. It's the fault of companies like Activision not putting in wider support for, controllers. Software mapping is similar, but it's complicated. I don't know how to explain it. I couldn't figure it out for myself, so I just use hardware mapping because it's simpler to understand. Like, the hardware mapping isn't the best, but it works. It's not as good as native support, of course, but it's still better than having to use touch controls a lot of the time. I like Call of Duty Mobile when it supports my controller. It's just picky about which controllers it likes. Like, it really wants to use official Xbox style controllers and stuff like that. And that sucks. That's not realistic with a mobile device unless you get a clip for it or unless you got a stand. But there's a big problem with that hardware mapping mode is the simulated right stick. The sensitivity by default on that simulated right stick, the touch, is very, very high. And the analog sticks aren't very good good at very high sensitivities. So you have to severely reduce the sensitivity to make it work with this. So in Call of Duty specifically, even at the lowest sensitivity you can have for that simulated right stick, it is still a little difficult to use because you can't really reach that sweet spot of just right where you're able to easily target people, but also you're able to make a quick 180. And in Call of Duty, you need to be able to accurately aim with small adjustments and be able to make big turns with no problem. And unfortunately, with hardware mapping, you can only do one or the other, so that sucks. So this, if you're doing this controller for Call of Duty, no, just no. The rest of the app is basically just advertisements. We have another game section here, and this shows a list of games that are compatible with controllers. It does log my device's information, so I think it also detects based off of what it thinks my phone can, run, but I don't know for sure, because my phone could run all these things for sure, and I knew it could before, but I don't know if it's recommending it to me because my phone can run it, or if it's because these games are just games that can support a controller. And then we have the store section, which just advertises more GameSir products to us, and on it does advertise the controller that you're looking at already, right here. So it doesn't even detect that I've already got this device, and it's still advertising it to me. That kind of sucks. That's a little annoying. And then the final section is the My section, which is a bio profile thing that you can build up. You can customize your themes and stuff like that. Just like the Switch, it only has 2 themes. So yeah, the app is good enough. It does what it needs to, and not a whole lot else. The game section is useful for discovering new games that will work with your controller. It's just there's not a lot of games that work with controllers on the phone. So womp womp. But I'm not using it for those. I'm using it mostly for retro gaming, which it works perfectly fine with. So honestly, I'm not really going to use the app at all after initial setup, unless something's wrong with my controller and I need to test that it's working. So honestly, the app is perfectly fine for what it is. The one time you use it and then never again. Alright, so we're going to play a little bit of Game Boy Advance on it. I've already played a little bit of Game Boy Advance already. I haven't done a lot of Game Boy Advance with this because I decided pretty early on that I'm going to stick to playing Game Boy Advance on my RG Cube. It's just, it works perfectly fine for me, and I've got progress on games on there already. This does have a bigger screen for Game Boy Advance, but it's not something I'm really going to use. It's not as... Because of the D-pad positioning, I think it's better for me to use the RG Cube. So this is Game & Watch Gallery. It's a Game Boy Advance game that has a collection of Game & Watch games on it, and some of them are remastered. This is a remaster of Fire. I have a Game & Watch series where I'm reviewing and talking about all the Game & Watch games, so if you want to learn more about this one's on the end card. Well, I probably have multiple on the end card because that's most of my videos right now. So the D-pad on this is very good. Like, I would be okay with most devices having this D-pad because it's so similar to the GBA-SP's D-pad. It's shallow, it's thin, it's soft, it's comfy. It's a great D-pad, and it's quick and responsive because of how shallow it is. It's perfect for this game specifically. This is a game where I typically have a few more losses by now on the RG Cube because of the specific, D-pad that it uses. This works really well with this because how fast and responsive it is. I'm like able to pull off high intense, high speed moments using this D-pad perfectly fine. But yeah, you get the point. It's Game & Watch, but that D-pad really makes a big difference. The A and B are also quite comfortable. I'm not really using the bumpers all that much. It's perfectly fine, but I've already got progress on Game & Watch on my RG Cube, so I'm not really going to swap off of it now. So GBA is usually my go-to console. Everything can emulate on it really, really easily, and I'm familiar with most of the games that are on the Game Boy Advance because of how much I played it. So Pokemon specifically won't play well with the analog stick because Pokemon has 4 degrees of movement, no diagonals on the Game Boy Advance. So the analog stick isn't a good fit for that, but pretty much everything else should work fine with an analog stick, but I don't recommend using this with games this far back because the D-pad is in this bad spot. While consoles like PSP may have the analog stick at the bottom, the analog stick may be at the bottom, but lots of PSP games are actually using this analog stick. But anything relying on the D-pad is going to require you to move your thumb down here and and have it at an angle like this, which makes it uncomfortable. So what I'll usually do is when I'm playing something that has heavy D-pad use, I'll move my hand below here instead of up here. I'll move it down here and use that, and that gives me better D-pad use. So it's not a full grip, but the Game Boy Advance doesn't use its shoulder buttons that much, so this is plenty comfortable. So, I mean, it would work fine with Game Boy Advance if I wanted it to, but I also have the RG Cube, which I can play with it normally and not have to grip it in this specific way to use the D-pad, because it's in the right spot already. It's made for this. So, one exception is that this D-pad is great for anything that requires speed. As I said, I'm getting higher scores on my Game & Watch games that I normally struggle with, and since the D-pad is very shallow and soft, it has an incredibly low travel time to get to those points, making me pull off some stuff in Fire that I couldn't do before. Normally in Fire you have the A button, which is B here, which would also send you right, and the B button would also send you left. So on things like the RG Cube, I would use these in tandem to get to the other side faster by pressing them both at the same time or near the same time. I don't have to do that with this. I can use just this D-pad because the travel time is so low on it. So I think these buttons, this D-pad and these buttons, are great for things like WarioWare, Game & Watch Gallery series, Rhythm Heaven, just about anything that requires fast reaction inputs. Alright, let's show off some PSP gameplay, because this is probably what I'm going to be playing the most of because of the use of the analog stick and the much wider screen. On the RG Cube, the PSP is microscopic. So I've been playing some Mega Man Powered Up. I haven't been able to finish Mega Man 1 ever because it's just too hard. So I've been playing Powered Up on easy mode because I am like a baby. We just beat Elec Man, so we should go for Fireman because I think the ones that are weak to each other are across from each other. I'm of course not going to play a full stage. So the D-pad does work with this, but I feel like I'm slower with the D-pad, so I've been using the analog stick. Keep in mind that I am bad at these games. When you say Mega Man to me, I think Battle Network. I don't think like Mega Man X or anything like that. I don't know how I'm supposed to get over there. Maybe if we use Iceman's power? Can I freeze that? Oh, clever. I'm so smart. Ow, fire. Okay, so we want to do it when it's halfway up there. God, I'm so smart. Really, y'all are lucky that you get to witness my genius. Oh, that was close. Okay, so we can once again use the ice here to do a little bit of cheesery. Not really cheesery because the game's intended to be played like this. Haha, bye. Ow. Look at that, we can skip over essentially half the stage. Oh, okay, I gotta... Oh, I'm out of juice. Okay, looks like we're gonna have to hoof it. Yeah, gotcha. Remember, I said in advance that I'm bad, which means that y'all have no power over me when you say it in the comments. If I was a Mega Man robot, I'd be unemployed man. Loser who sleeps on your couch man. See, the analog stick is good for games that have, like... that just require you to do movement. But, like, if you needed to use this for camera control, it's terrible. Like, all I can say is trust me, bro, when it comes to using the right analog stick, because I didn't play that much that used the right analog stick because I couldn't really get anything running. I haven't gotten around to putting the BIOS on this phone, which, you know, I'm just slacking. Oh my god, of course it would come out of nowhere. This is also my first time playing this, so to try to be nice. Fudge it, we ball. Nope. Okay, so Mega Man Powered Up is bad. But it works perfectly fine. So PSP works perfectly fine because, like, it was designed with a small analog stick in the first place. It controls fine. The left analog stick controls fine. It works fine. I am able to comfortably play games that involve movement with it, no problem. It's the right analog stick that's a problem. When it comes to right analog stick, it becomes an issue because aiming while moving is hard because these sticks are small, so you don't have a lot of grip and control when it comes to this. Maybe it works fine in a normal first-person shooter that's not Call of Duty Mobile, but like I said, I haven't gotten around to adding the BIOS onto my phone for the PS2. I've just been lazy about it, so I haven't messed with anything on the PS2. And the PS1 didn't really have any shooters that used both sticks anyway, so I Haven't really been able to test it because this phone probably can't handle anything that would run those things. So the right analog stick functionally doesn't exist for me. I did try Metroid, and it turns out that Metroid doesn't use the right analog stick to aim, the C stick, which is weird. Weird choice, Nintendo. So I didn't get to test it that way either. And Ratchet & Clank Size Matters, of course, doesn't use the right stick because it's on a system that doesn't have a right stick. But Ratchet Size Matters, it plays just fine with it. Like, the analog stick works. The left analog stick works. Movement, it's fine if the stick is small, but it's the right stick that needs to have more control. It needs to be taller and wider. It's the same height as a Tegenaria, so it's perfectly fine for first-person games, but I still like a longer stick than even this. But, like, this thing is supposed to be portable. PSP is a natural fit because of how many games use the actual thumbstick. PS Vita, by extension, is pretty good, too. If you can get the Vita emulator to run on your phone, I can't. GameCube and PS2 are great fits with it. I've had a lot of fun on the GameCube. I played Mystic Heroes, and it felt really good, but I haven't put a lot on here yet. I've got Metroid Prime, Mystic Heroes, and Skies of Arcadia, and I just haven't gotten around to playing it. The things that use the left analog stick only are perfectly fine. Things that use right stick are going to start seeing some issues. The stick heads are too small, but you get used to them. Once you get into modern games, it starts to be a bit of an issue. So when playing things on Steam Link that use the right stick, I'm noticing some issues. So let's get into some modern games, because actually, it does turn out that I do have some modern games that I can use as an example. Okay, so unfortunately, I couldn't show you Steam Link because my office is not in the same room as my internet, so the latency was really bad on it. It was just not playable. So instead, I'm showing you this old game called Shadowgun Legends, which is also a first-person shooter still. Like I said, it is hard to get it into a sweet spot where you can turn quickly and aim accurately. This is just an okay game, but it's against AI, which means I can show you the controller without having to be dominated by random players as soon as we get into some actual action. So, like, because this is a phone game, the enemies actually don't move that fast from what I've seen because they expect you to be struggling. So I do have some slight precision issues, but it's still feels better to me than using touch controls, honestly. So I'm not going to get quick 360s. So, and if I turn up the sensitivity, I'm going to lose out on accuracy. So you have to choose whether you want to have slow aim and be accurate, or if you want to be able to turn on people and maybe kill them, because by the time you turn around, you're still not going to have good accurate aim because of the limitations of the aiming. You can notice that I'm aiming with the left stick a lot more than I'm aiming with the right stick. So the stick length is perfectly fine. It's just the low comfort of the head of the stick. So I was incorrect to say that the stick is too short, because I know now the stick is the same length as the Tegenaria stick, which is perfectly fine. I prefer it. The problem is more the issues with gaming on a phone, the small screen and stuff like that. And then the head of the stick is also small, making it a little hard to use. So I still wouldn't recommend this for competitive shooters unless all your opponents are using touchpads, because I think you're going to have an advantage here by nature of using an actual controller. So yeah, it's fine, it's suitable. But if you're wanting to play some precision sort of shooter, like I tried to get Cruel running and it didn't work very well. I tried Gunfire Reborn on my own time, and I noticed that in my gameplay with Gunfire Reborn that I can't show because of my recording space is in a different room than my internet, so Steam Link doesn't work the best. I noticed that my gameplay speed is much slower when I'm playing with this. So I noticed that I'm much slower, I'm not jumping as much. I don't think we can jump in this game at all, actually. But in Gunfire Reborn, I don't jump around as much, I don't move as much, I don't get in people's faces as much. I choose to use automated guns a lot more, and I already use auto-aim weapons in Gunfire Reborn quite a bit. So It's fine, but if the game you're playing has a strong aim assist, use it, and you're gonna need a strong aim assist for this. Goofy little old game. It hasn't changed much in the several years since I last played it. I also find myself randomly going and aiming further than I mean to. Because of the small stick head, I can't correct my aim too well. Gun to my head, I could not pull off a headshot on this. Against a real player who's actually moving more. So you're definitely going to miss out on movement speed and play speed and stuff like that, and controllers are already at a disadvantage to PC users when it comes to play speed. Like how you personally play, how fast you personally play. See, you can see that I'm just barely making outlines on the characters when I go to shoot. I'm missing them. I spend a lot of time correcting my aim, but thankfully this is a slow-paced game, so I don't really have to worry about it. But if you're playing something like Doom, you're gonna have to play on an easier difficulty. You're not gonna have a good time on Doom. Gunfire Reborn, it's playable, but I don't think I'd be able to finish a run on Nightmare mode with it. And something like Cruel, which is a very high-speed shooting game that requires headshots to get far, you're just straight up not going to be able to play it. I think ultimately this controller is for 4 kinds of people. The first is the casual gamer who wants to move past imprecise touch controls. This controller is an excellent all-rounder. This is someone who probably uses their phone to game regularly and maybe wants to dabble in emulation, but isn't quite sure if it's something that they want to do frequently enough to warrant buying a more expensive controller. A big bonus if you're the type who isn't tech-savvy and just wants something to plug in and start using it. In that regard, this is a great controller for that. For the vast majority of retro games that you could want to play that your phone is probably capable of playing, this controller will do that. The second is a gamer who found out that their phone was really good at running emulators, Steam Link, Moonlight, or Game Pass, and maybe just wants to squeeze in some Genshin and Zenless with more comfortable controls. They might even want to upgrade to a more powerful phone, but want to try a phone grip controller before they decide to all in on a more expensive model like the Razer Kishi. This controller is also great for that situation. It's not good for first-person shooters that use the right analog stick a lot. It's okay, it's passable, but if it's a high-speed shooter, you will not get a lot of use out of that right analog stick that feels good to you. But if you're using it for something like Genshin or Zenless, where you're just using the camera to see your surroundings, it's good. It's great. It's perfectly fine. The third is a busy gamer who wants to beat more of their Steam backlog, but doesn't want to spend a bunch of money on something like a Steam Deck. If their phone is good enough, they might be fine with using it with Moonlight, Steam Link, Game Pass, or some other gaming streaming service. But they don't want to spend a ton on a grip controller until they know for sure that they like it. Having a Steam Deck would be cool, but you already have a recent smartphone, and this $30 grip controller is much cheaper than dropping $500 on a PC handheld or $200 on something like a Retroid, especially if it turns out that your phone is already better than most Retroid products, like mine was. The fourth and final is for the budget gamer who wants to play as much as possible for as little as possible, while having a good enough controller to do so. You want a nice and simple device that you don't want to have to worry about charging. You just toss it in your bag and go. This is also great for that. It is a great convenience gaming device. I think if you're the hardcore gamer sort, that this controller is probably not good for you. You're going to have much higher expectations than this. You'll probably want something a little larger and with bigger sticks. One that's Bluetooth would be better for you too, as it wouldn't take power from your phone, so you can have longer play sessions. For you, I'd recommend a phone clip made for your controller of choice, which is usually cheaper than this even, if you already own a good controller. Otherwise, consider getting a GameSir G8 and getting something with a cooler if your phone is the type that heats up when you game. This controller is for someone who is aware that it's a budget device and that it'll have some concessions made with that in mind. Someone who wants to game more without spending a lot more, or just for trying it out and seeing if gaming on a phone is even something that they'd want to do. If you're someone interested in a Retroid or another Android-based handheld, try using your phone with a grip like this one first. You don't want to buy a $200 handheld and possibly regret it later. Chances are, your phone might be better than than what's available. In which case, why not give it a try? I'm great for making some progress on that massive backlog because the best handheld to have is the one you already have on you. Thanks for watching. If you like this sort of thing, consider subbing for more. I'm constantly getting new gadgets and doohickeys. If the subject of using your phone for retro gaming is interesting to you, I'm working on a video for that next. If you like controllers and want to see another GameSir product, check out my video on the Tegenaria. It's a PS2 style controller with Hall effect sticks for just 20 bucks. It even works with the Switch too, and it's hard to beat that. Bye!